Hello, everybody. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm Ksenia Turkova, and please join, like, and subscribe, and leave your comments, ask your questions. So let's start our live stream today. And first, let's check if everything is okay now. If you can see me, you can hear me, and the connection is good. Because last time, you remember my first live stream, I was talking like about 15 minutes, and only after that I realized I was actually off, and I had to restart and to say everything again, to repeat it again, which was actually good because I probably did it better. So today we are going to talk about, of course, what is going on in Ukraine. I actually initially I planned this live stream to talk about Crimean bridge, Kerch bridge, about its symbolism for Russia, and about how important this bridge is as a symbol for Russia, and they take it as a psychological attack, as a metaphorical attack, more than physical attack. So I will talk about that, and of course, but today I woke up and read the news, and I saw all those news about bombing center of the Kiev and different Ukrainian cities. And of course, we will talk about that as well, and about how Russian state media and how Russian propaganda reacted on all this. What did they tell about that? I wrote a big article in Russian today in the morning for Voice of America about this. And let's check the connection. Good evening. Or morning. Someone has morning, someone has evening. So again, welcome to my live stream. Please join and interact. So I saw today in the morning, I saw those news about bombing different Ukrainian cities, and especially the center of Kiev, where I lived for several years, and it was very sad to see it. I had a feeling like February 24th is back again, like we are again on February 24th. But although I had this feeling, I had different emotions, because I remember that shock, and how scared I was, how shocked I was. And I cried a lot when it started. But today, didn't have those emotions anymore. It was very sad to see it, but I felt like the war changed me a lot. And my Ukrainian friends say the same. They say that the difference is it's very similar what is going on today in Kiev and what was going on February 24th. But the difference is, they say, we're not afraid anymore. I apologize in advance if I'm a little bit slow and I forget. So I had 3 lectures in a row at the University of Maryland, so I can barely speak, but I'll try to do my best. We talked as well about Russian propaganda, and also about some changes in Russian language, and how the current events affect the language and our everyday communication. So I lived in Kiev, and almost every weekend we went to the park called Shevchenko Park near University of Shevchenko in Kiev with my son. And it was one of his favorite places in Kiev. And today I saw what was done to it. The university was damaged, and Park Shevchenko and surroundings, and one of the publishing houses. I know it's located right in front of Shevchenko Park, in one of the old buildings in Kiev, and it was also damaged. Although in Russia they say they hit strategic objects or infrastructure, or you saw those videos and saw those photos. University is damaged, museums are damaged, playground for children is damaged, parks, and so on. And it's very painful to see. It was very painful for me to see this place I loved so much, and I always pictured myself going back to Ukraine and walking with my dog, because I wanted to take my dog, my American dog, to Ukraine, and show him Kiev. And my son, again, as I said, already loved that place. Also, that is the irony of fate. You know, in at the University of Shevchenko, they have Russian linguistics department, and the rooms of that Russian language department were seriously damaged. I posted that picture on my Facebook page today, and I will post it in community on YouTube so you can see it. It was seriously damaged. So the Russian world came and destroyed the Department of Russian Language. They always say that they're trying to save Russian-speaking people from oppression, from repressions in Ukraine, from savage Ukrainian Nazis, and people who want to kill them and so on. But you see, they destroy the museums, they destroy the departments of Russian language. And my colleagues, linguists from Ukraine, Russian linguists who were teaching Russian philology, Russian literature and language at the Ukrainian universities, Kharkiv University, which was destroyed in the beginning of the war, and in different other universities, they told me nobody has done so much harm to the Russian linguistics as Putin did. He actually does everything to destroy it, and to destroy it, to destroy the interest to Russian language and to Russian culture and to Russian language in the whole world because of what is going on. And how did the TV, Russian TV, and Russian state media react on those attacks, how they commented them? On air and on the websites, on the main Russian TV channels, Channel First, Russia 24, and MTV, there were news about attacks on the critical infrastructure of Kyiv and all of Ukraine. TV channels quoted Putin as saying that the targets of the massive strike with high precision weapons, again, that phrase high precision weapons, I mentioned that before, that it became a euphemism for actually strikes that destroy civil objects. So Putin mentioned it again, high precision weapons. They strike, they hit energy, military objects and communication facilities of Ukraine. And they did hit those facilities and infrastructure objects, but they also hit civilian objects, as you saw. So the phrase critical infrastructure, as I noticed, I watched some Russian reports on TV, and as I noticed, they repeat it many times. They emphasize it, critical infrastructure, and they want to emphasize that Russia did not strike residential areas and streets. And the reporter of Channel 1, Anton Vernitsky, I watched his report in particular. He specially noted in his material, Ukrainian propaganda diligently does not show such shots of hitting critical objects, exposing on the internet only hitting city streets. So he says that Ukrainian propaganda, in his words, doesn't show that Russia aimed infrastructure objects, that they don't admit it. They only say that Russia hit civil objects. And after I heard that, I decided to check it. I opened the first Ukrainian news site I knew, NVUA. It's one of the popular news websites. And on the main page, I saw the title, big title with big letters, that Russia hit infrastructure objects. So what he said in his report was not true at all, because in Ukraine, they, of course, they admit, they say, yes, Russia hit infrastructure objects, and there is almost no light in Lviv now, for example, and they talk about it openly. Nobody is hiding anything. But of course, they also say that with infrastructure objects, Russia hit the civil objects as well. As I have already said, museums and parks and playgrounds and language department at the University of Shevchenko, and nearby houses. And there are 14 people at least. 14 people at least were killed during those attacks. The Channel One report also focuses on how the Ukrainian authorities allegedly lied to people, quote, trying to convince the population that everything is under control. But, continues the Channel First correspondent, Kharkiv is completely de-energized. The Kyiv metro has stopped working. The power has gone out of urban areas. That was, again, a quote from that video piece on TV. And that is not true either, because, as I have already said, Ukrainian authorities didn't hide anything, and they don't lie to the population that nothing is destroyed and everything is okay and everything is under control. And here, why did I quote it? It's very important. And here we see again that mirroring tool. You remember I told you about that tool, propaganda tool, in my videos many times. Russia uses it all the time. So here we see the mirroring. That quote, everything is under control. The thing is that since the war started, that was one of the main mantras of Russian propaganda. Everything is under control. So they were trying to show people that the course of the war is under control, is under Putin's control, is under officials' control. And they were constantly saying in the news, in talk shows, that everything is under control, that Putin controls the situation. He knows what he's doing. Although we couldn't take Kyiv in 3 days, everything is still under control. And they were repeating that over and over again. And now they put those words in Ukrainians' mouth, Ukraine's mouth. So they say that Ukrainian officials are using that mantra, are using that phrase, that narrative, everything is under control, although it was Russia who used it all the time. And here we come to the story with the Crimean bridge, because they repeated this mantra talking about Crimean bridge. And this is very interesting. When I opened the websites of the main Russian TV channels after what happened to Ukrainian bridge, I saw news about bridge without, it was like news were, the beginning of the event was cut, and I saw only the second part of what is going on after. So all the news on the websites and on air, I watched some pieces, and in every piece, in every news, in every text, they were talking about how they are fixing the bridge, how everything is under control. And the bridge is almost fixed. Everything is fine. The authorities are working on it. They help people, volunteers on the bridge. They give people hot food for those who are standing in the lines. And the reporter was there, and he was talking to people, and they were telling him, everything is fine. We're just standing in the line here, but it seems like everything is working. And the independent Russian-speaking media, news outlet, Meduza. You probably heard about that media. If not, I recommend to read it because they have an English version as well. So an independent Russian news outlet, Meduza, wrote that they found out that right after the explosion of Crimean Bridge, Kremlin sent out the guidelines. I made a short video about that. Kremlin sent out the guidelines to every media or state media with the recommendations or with the instructions of how to cover what happened to Crimean Bridge. And there were several points. The journalists must emphasize that everything is okay, under control, and bridge is being fixed. That was number one instruction. Number two was that I think they repaired the. They need to mention that the local authorities are working on it and everything is under control. So there were 3 or 4 points, 3 or 4 instructions, basically repeating each other, and the reporters must emphasize it, covering a Crimean Bridge. So in any news, I read some news on those websites of the state TV channels in Russia, and I didn't find, you know how you write the news text? You write, you put what is the newest in the beginning, and then you write the background. You say that earlier something happened, this or that happened to the Crimean Bridge. You put a background in the second part of the news, of your news text. But there was no that second part. They even didn't mention it. So there were news about repairing the bridge and fixing it, but there was no news about actually what happened to the bridge. And also, I forgot, one of the instructions says that the journalists must emphasize that the bridge was not destroyed. The bridge was a little damaged. So they don't need to concentrate on some destruction. They just say that something happened, a little damaged, and we're fixing it. But at the same time, it's interesting that one of the narratives actually was nothing serious happened. It's the narrative number 1 I noticed. Nothing serious happened. We are repairing the bridge, we're fixing it, everything will be okay. And actually it was predictable, they say. Some Crimean authorities, they say it was predictable. What do you want? It's a strategic object. So we were kind of predicting it, and now we were ready, and now we are fixing it. So that was a narrative number 1. The narrative number 2 is that everything is under control, and the next narrative is actually the opposite to it. They contradict each other, because the next narrative is how dare they can do it, because they were, of course, blaming Ukrainian for doing that. Let's give them the most aggressive and tough response. And some of the politicians in the talk shows, and some of the journalists and bloggers, they demanded the toughest and the most aggressive response to what happened. And here you can see how 2 propaganda narratives, they contradict each other. It doesn't add up. Why? If you say it's not serious, if you say nothing serious happened, why would you demand the toughest response? Why would you demand to end the war and to win and to do everything, to put all your effort to win this war, and to give the toughest response to Ukraine? It doesn't make sense. Let me read your messages, and I guess everything is going well. Okay, I see a message in Russian, And one of my viewers is asking, is it okay to write in Russian, because his Ukrainian is not very good. But my Ukrainian it's not my native language either. So I just learned it. My native language is Russian. I speak fluently Ukrainian, but you can write in Russian and Ukrainian, you can write in English, but I will translate it into English because my live stream is in English. But you are welcome to write in any language I know. Russian, Ukrainian, English, French. And I read in some other languages as well, so I can read in Belarusian, for example. I really don't see. I really don't see much point in paying attention to Russian sources. It's impossible to know what's truth, half truth, or outright lies. I see it. It does make sense to pay attention to Russian sources because we need to document it. It's very important for the research purposes. We need to document it. We need to research what Russian propaganda does. And in my opinion, it's really important. Okay, I guess everything is going fine. Okay, let's continue with the Crimean Bridge. So I told you about several narratives. Everything is under control, nothing serious happened. Let's give it the toughest response to Ukraine. And one more very important narrative is that we don't like what Putin does. So some of even patriotic bloggers and journalists, they said Putin needs to explain to people how it was possible, how our bridge, that symbol of Putin's power and Russia's power, how it was damaged, destroyed. Putin needs to explain it to people. And some politicians and some journalists, they demanded that response from Putin, meaning response to people to explain what is going on. Because before they saw the successful counteroffensive of Ukraine, they saw several successful situations successful for Ukraine, several situations in a row. And they saw how the mobilization went when they took just all people, and it was a mess, and they need that response. They started understanding that something is going wrong in this war, because in February, Putin told us he will take, and the military people, they told us they would take Kyiv in 3 days. Okay, we didn't take Kyiv in 3 days. I saw how Margarita Simonyan, the head of Russia Today, explained it. And she was criticizing the authorities, actually. And she said, yes, we were expecting to take Kyiv in 3 days. It didn't happen. But of course, she explained, it's understandable because we are fighting, not only with Ukraine, we are fighting with against the whole world, against 55 countries, she said. So, okay, that's obvious because we are alone in this world against everybody. But how the mobilization goes and how they leave those towns and cities, they had already, I don't know, occupied, or in Russia's version, liberated. And when they leave those cities right after so-called referenda, it makes people to ask some questions. So the reputation, the Putin's reputation, is actually in danger. And here we see the toughest response. We saw it today in the morning. So what is special about Crimean Bridge, and why I called it a symbol of Russia's power and Putin's power? As I said before, that explosion on Russia's bridge to Crimea struck a blow against Russia's military effort in Ukraine. And it was also a psychological attack to Moscow. And some people called it a major propaganda victory for Ukraine. a major symbol victory, metaphorical victory for Ukraine, as it was with that worship Moscow. You remember that Snake Island and Russian worship go fuck yourself. So Russia began that constructing that enormous bridge, 19 kilometer. It's about 12 miles. They started it several years ago, right after the annexation of Crimea, illegal annexation in 2014. And at that time, I worked on the radio station in Ukraine, in Kyiv, and we talked a lot about that project. I do remember we discussed it a lot with different experts on there. And we talked about history because they tried before to build that bridge. After the World War II, I think there were a couple of attempts, but they were not successful because the surface is very, very difficult. It's moving, and each time they tried to build the bridge, it was not successful. They failed because of the difficult surface. So you really need to put, I don't know, extreme amount of money to build the bridge or to make it happen. And for Russia, it was very important as a propaganda victory because they said, we will build that bridge. And so they put almost $4 billion to make it happen. And they opened it, and it was, they showed it on TV. When the day it was opened, it was a convoy over the bridge, driving a truck with flags, and they showed it in the news, and everybody was happy in Russia that they finally built that bridge. And there was not only propaganda on TV, like in news, there was also some kind of cultural propaganda involved, because Margarita Simonyan, the head of Russia Today, she wrote a script for the romantic comedy called The Crimean Bridge Made with Love. And they showed it in the movie theaters all around Russia. It's a romantic movie about two guys working on building the bridge, and they like the same cute girl. So the screenplay, as I have already said, was written by Margarita Simonyan, and they showed it on TV. And as far as I remember, in the movie theaters, that Crimean Bridge Made with Love. So that was also some kind of cultural propaganda. So the bridge was really a symbol, and it was a very important symbol for Putin. So it was very important to keep it safe and to show that everything works in Crimea as a big part, not only of infrastructure, but as I have already said, a big part of Russia's image and of Putin's regime. And as a linguist, I want to add an interesting detail. It's actually a funny detail. You know, every year in different countries, in the United States as well, the linguists decide what kind of new words they will officially put in the dictionary, because some new words appear in our language. I remember how the word selfie appeared, and they put it in the dictionary. So in Russia, I think a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, there was news that they put 150 new words in the Russian dictionary. And among those words and phrases was Crimean Bridge. So they put Crimean Bridge into Russian dictionary as a new toponym, as a new name. And then in 3 weeks, it was exploded. So you see what is going on, and it was a kind of psychological attack on Putin's image and on Russia's image. And what else I wanted to mention? I have already said about that romantic movie. So I will give you some quotes about what the main propagandists and the journalists and politicians were saying. So, for example, Sergei Mironov, the leader of Russia, oh, I forgot that word. One of the political parties in Russia, he said that the time has come to smash the infrastructure of the Kiev neo-Nazi regime. That was a quote. And once again, he made this parallel with the Second World War. References to the Second World War from the very beginning of the war have become one of the ways of that mirroring I was talking about. Because while the whole world is comparing Putin's actions with Hitler's actions, in Russia itself, they compare Ukraine and the actions of Ukrainian authorities to Hitler's actions. So they do actually the same. And Sergei Mironov said, the last doubts that Ukraine is a fascist state disappeared. So there is no doubt anymore that Ukraine is a fascist state. With such acts as exploding Crimean bridge, although we don't know for sure who did it, Kyiv wants to block our peninsula with its inhabitants, with the people, just as the Germans tried to make a blockade, actually did the blockade of Leningrad during the Second World War. The time has come to destroy power plants, all bridges and railways that ensure the and destroy a Kiev junta, as Mironov said. He wrote it in his social media. And also, of course, Dmitry Medvedev, my favorite. He couldn't stay away from what is going on. And he wrote in his Telegram channel, he is kind of in charge for the trash style in Russian political rhetoric. So he wrote in his Telegram channel, the first episode has been played. He wrote today about the attacks on Kiev and on Ukraine. There will be the others, he means episodes. And he called for complete destroying of Ukraine's political regime. I won't quote everybody because I don't want to quote propagandists and Russian politicians too much. I just want to give you a whole picture and to underline some interesting moments you need to know. So that was actually all I wanted to tell you, that it was an important psychological attack. And yes, it was expected that Putin will Putin's response will be something like what we saw today, seeing attacks on Kiev and on other Ukrainian cities. But again, I want to emphasize that we don't know who is responsible for the explosion of the Crimean bridge, because there are different opinions of different experts, and some of them say that actually Russia can be behind that explosion, so they can create that situation we have now. So let me first of all, read your questions, and also I want to read your comments. I post in community, I wrote a post about Putin's birthday, and I asked you what would you wish Putin on his birthday. So I will read some of your comments because I really like some of them. And also let me read some of your comments here. I don't want to quote Russian propagandists too much. This is a breath of fresh air. Yes, and actually, it's so difficult to read all this stuff. I understand that it's important, and for me, it's at the same time it's interesting as a researcher, but at the same time, it's difficult and it's painful to read. But I have one of my guilty pleasures is to watch Russian state TV channel Zvezda. It's a channel that belongs to Ministry of Defense, And the language they use, you can say that main state TV channels in Russia, they use that all kinds of propaganda tools. But if you hear, if you watch Zvezda, the Star, it's called Star. If you watch this TV channel, I I can't describe what I feel every time I hear them and what they say. Unfortunately, it's untranslatable. I can't translate what they say about everybody, about United States, about Great Britain, about the Queen, about Ukraine, of course. And I have an impression that I'm sitting with my hair like this each time I watch that Zvezda channel, but I keep watching and I keep taking notes. And how will this affect the opinion of the Kremlin regime? You mean just regular citizens, how people can change their mind? I don't know, because it's very difficult to do any polls now in Russia. You know, people are afraid, so you can't actually measure the public opinion. Although recently, some researchers from Russia and from the United States, they did a big research about what people think about, like, public opinion about the war in Ukraine. It's very interesting, and I have already planned the interview with one of the researchers who lives here in Michigan, and I will talk to her in next few days, and I will post it on my channel. So they did that big research. It's an interesting research. I just was looking for some new artists. I might not remember any pro-Russian artists' names, but it's probably by the handful. I guess I'm reading the end of some. It's not the whole. Let me get to the beginning, and I will start reading again. Okay, I'm continuously shocked at the amount of pro-Russian propaganda music videos that feature the military, obviously aimed at young men. That was the message from New Orleans. Yes, as I said, propaganda is not only in news. Propaganda is in culture, in the movies, and sometimes you can think that you can watch something not related to politics at all, and it will be okay. It's so innocent. So, for example, my son, I actually motivate him. He likes watching YouTube, and I motivate him to watch Russian movies and Russian series because I want him to maintain language. And his Russian is perfect still after 5 years in the US. Maybe thanks for YouTube. And once I heard what he was watching. He was watching some series about he likes ambulance, you know, that about doctors and how they work in the hospital. And there was a series like that. And so in one of the dialogues, they were talking about. They mentioned traveling to Crimea and using Crimean bridge. It was several years ago, and I heard that phrase, and I was like, they put propaganda even there. Even in some small dialogues, they put some small propaganda pieces. So yes, it's in the music, and there are pro-Kremlin artists and pro-Kremlin singers, and they sing those songs, and they make those video clips and stuff like that. So Iranian girls are an example of how to protest your government. The people need to put extreme pressure on Putin. It's a collective effort on all fronts. On the one hand, I agree with you. Yes, but on the other hand, I don't see how it's possible now in Russia, because a lot of people, all the opposition is in prison or left the country. So there is no leader at all. People are scared. A lot of people, they are not even, as you know, they say, we're not interested in politics, we're not about politics. And there is even an anecdote Which concentration camp are we going to? I don't know. I'm not about politics. So I'm far from politics in Russian version. So people even making jokes about that because Russian people were always they were never that much involved into politics as, for example, Ukrainian people. I remember how I visited Ukraine for the first time, I think in the early 2000s, so kind of 20 years ago. And I was sitting in the restaurant and I heard what people were talking about, and they were talking about politics. And it was so different from Russia. And I talked to some people and they told me, yes, Ukrainians are they're very active politic wise. They feel that capacity to change the situation. They feel that they are able to change the power. They can change the president, and they actually do. They did it several times already, and they can go on the streets. So in Russia, the mentality is different, and the situation is different, and a lot of repressions. People are scared, and so I don't see the situation when people can really go on the streets. Maybe because of mobilization, and we saw what was going on in Dagestan when women went on the streets and they actually were protesting like seriously. And I think in Kremlin they saw it as a threat because they saw what people in different regions can do. And now in different regions of Russia, because of what Putin is doing, the self-identity of those regions is waking up. And they are understanding now, they came to understanding that they have ties to some other countries. First of all, not only to Russia, like Buryatia, they realized suddenly that they have more ties with Mongolia than with Russia, and also self-identity, language, traditions. So when Putin says that the West wants to pull Russia apart, it's not true. It's actually Putin does everything to do it from inside the country, because he makes different populations, different nations to realize themselves as subjects. And so he puts a lot of effort in it, not the West. Oftentimes to win us to our harm. The instruments of darkness tell us truth, win us with honest. I think it's some quote, and I probably don't recognize it. Okay, what will be the fall of the Russian government, economy, military, citizens? It's hard to answer this question, and I actually don't like answer questions like that because I'm not a political analyst. So I don't want to be that kind of expert who knows the answers of to any question. It devalues what I do. So I can talk about propaganda. I can talk about language and how is language affected by the events, and how the events are affected by language, and so on. And I can analyze some situations based on what I know, and based on what kind of interviews I did and what kind of research I did. So I can talk about things like that, self-identity. But what can lead to the fall of the regime? It may be more question to some things like that, self-identity. But what can lead to the fall of the regime? It may be more question to some political analyst, and I don't know. Russians really know their dark humor. Don't let your son watch the Russian show in turns. Yes, I used to watch that show. I have to admit, it was many years ago. I used to watch it, and it seemed to me that it was a good show. It seemed funny. It was maybe 10, more than 10 years ago. Yes, I watched it. Ivan Khlobystin is in that show, and he's a monster. That's true. his speech at the Kremlin was sickering. You're absolutely right. Ivan Akhlabystin is the example of that patriotic artists who actually became more activists, pro-war, pro-Kremlin activists, than more than artists. Because, for example, Zakhar Prilepin, he used to be a popular Russian writer, and he became, in my eyes, I used to like his books, but after he supported the operation in Donbass, the invasion of Donbass, I stopped reading it. And he not only supported that, he was bragging on killing people there. And he made a lot of hateful statements about Ukraine and Ukrainians. And he became more like a soldier, like Putin's soldier, more than a writer. I don't see him as a writer anymore. Although I read some of his books and I thought, oh, he was talented. But now, for me, his talent is destroyed by that. And when I was watching Intern's show, I was also thinking, oh, Akhlabystin is so funny. He's a good actor. But now I can't watch anything with him. And yes, as you said, it was sickening. Anyone got eyes on Rasputin? Military and the dream of being the world superpower. Yes, they have this dream. I would love for the citizens to surprise us. The answer to that, a lot of intelligence organizations would like to. If you know, that's true. If you know the answer to that, how the Putin's regime can fall, you would a lot of intelligence organization would like to offer you money. That's true, because it's the question for $1 million. Nobody knows how Putin's regime can fall. Okay, so if you don't have any more questions, you can still post them. I will read some of your responses. What would you wish Putin for his birthday? Okay, let's start. From James. Everyone here, I'm wishing him a pretty painful death, which is understandable. I would like him to be well and alive to witness his total and complete failure, to be ridiculed publicly and relentlessly by not only his own peers, his family, and his own people. His legacy will be erased from history, and he will be only known as the greatest Russian failure of all time. It's a good wish, but I don't think he will be erased from history. I think he definitely will stay in history, but how he will stay in the history, that's a question. And I think he should stay in the history, as you said, not only as a failure, but as a villain, as Hitler stayed in the history. So that kind of historical legacy. A slow and painful death for his crimes against humanity and the legacy to match. Most spectacular birthday fireworks show in recent history. He got it on the Crimean Bridge. To be Zelensky's prisoner. Let the comedian figure out what to do with him. Although I like this one, it's witty, but at the same time, I disagree a little bit because, in my opinion, Zelensky is not a comedian anymore. Although he is very talented actor, and I advise you to watch The Servant of the People, it's on Netflix. He is a very talented actor, and he's smart and intelligent. But I think he evolved during this war into something else. He is not a comedian figure anymore. He is something much more bigger, and he will stay in there for sure. A trip to the front line, Bucha maybe. If he goes to the front line, maybe it works somehow. But if he goes to Bucha, I was thinking about that when I was reading your comments. It won't make anything to him. He doesn't have empathy, I think, from what I see. from his actions, I can tell that this person doesn't have empathy. And if he goes to Bucha, and if he sees all the destructions, and if he sees all those people who were suffering from under the Russia's occupation, he won't feel anything. So it won't have any effect on him. That is a good one. A visit from Uncle Heimer. Uncle Heimers. I wish him a long life in a Russian prison where no one wants to live all that long. Okay. Пряники. Пряник is like gingerbread in Russia. It's a traditional Russian dessert. Пряники laced with novichok. I'd like him to serve himself some tea, probably also with polonium or with novichok, trial, and sent to the coldest gulag naked. People, Putin likes appear in public naked. He used to like it. Now he doesn't like it anymore. But you remember him on the horse, and Putin likes appear in public naked. He used to like it. Now he doesn't like it anymore. But you remember him on the horse, and he thought he was so sexy. Get a hobby. That is a very good wish. Actually, when I'm thinking about him and his life, he's isolated from the whole world. He's isolated from people. He doesn't communicate much with people. If you saw his inauguration, empty streets in Moscow, and he was walking down the streets, and it's actually a very sad picture to see. He's alone. He never talks publicly about his family. Nobody knows about his family. It's all some secret wife, secret mistress, secret daughters. The journalists had to call his daughters so-called daughters, or supposedly daughters of Putin. It's not normal. And when I think about him and what kind of life he has, I actually feel a little sorry for him sometimes. And get a hobby, it's a good advice. I'm sure he doesn't have any hobbies. He's already dead. And I agree with that. I agree with that because morally and emotionally and like heart-wise, I agree that he's already dead. And as a politician as well, for the whole world. Ukraine is lucky to have Zelensky at this time in history. He is a true man of the people who cares deeply for his folk and his nation. Not many countries can make the same claim. It was a comment from Andy. I think Putler needed to be sent to clean up remains of Russian soldiers. You see what kind of wishes this person gets for his birthday. I didn't see any nice, like really nice wish. How can you live like that? That when the whole world is wishing you death, is wishing you some tortures or stuff you wrote. So actually, the whole world hates you. I don't care what happens to Putin as long as his actions can stand as a lesson of what we need to stop. I'm glad you did a live chat. I'm new to your content. Thanks for the work. Thank you very much. Okay, I guess I read everything. Thank you so much for watching. I think we have some problems with the connection. Please write something in the chat. Thanks God it happened at the end of our live stream, not at the beginning. Please write something. Ksenia, what can be done to undo propaganda-fueled beliefs of an ordinary Z zombie? What can bring such a person into the reality, in your opinion? Anything else apart from Russian army losing the war? Thanks for the question. It's a great question. But before I answer this question, please type in the chat. Do you hear me well? Do you see me well? Something in the chat. Thank you for all your efforts. Just give me some sign that everything is fine with the connection now. After that, I will answer this question that I like very much. I can hear you. Sounds good. Thank you. So as for the people poisoned with propaganda, what to do with them? Z zombie, I like this word. Again, I will read it again. What can be done to undo propaganda-fueled beliefs of any ordinary Z zombie? Unfortunately, I do not have response to that. I do not have answer to that question. I have relatives and I have friends who are, I think, poisoned with Russian propaganda. It's very difficult to talk to them. And it's very, with some of them, I almost don't talk. I lost a lot of friends since 2014. And I don't know what we can do. Just wait, maybe wait, and slowly give them some small portions of information. If you start arguing with a person like that, it doesn't lead to anything. So it won't help at all. So you can occasionally send them some link, uh, talk to them, and for example, even simple stories with everyday communication, simple stories help. If you talk to a person like that, you're still in a good relationship, although you have absolutely different political views and they watch Russian TV from morning till night. But I know the stories when people are still communicating. So let's say you are still communicating with that person, and you can tell, for example, if I talk to a person like that, I can tell them some positive things about United States, for example, because all they say in Russia, it's only negative things about United States. Life here is horrible. If you watch Russian TV, I don't know how I survive here. So when I talk to a person like that, I would describe, like I would say, oh, yesterday we went to the Russian school, weekend Russian school, because my son goes to Russian school, and we had such a great time. And then, so to show them that Russian culture is not canceled here, and nobody is trying to cancel everything everywhere connected to Russia, that Russian people are not oppressed. But I don't say it straight. I say it by telling just a story about my life. Or I would mention something else. So I would say like small steps and small efforts help like that. On a big scale, what can be done? First, I do believe we need to document what propaganda does. That's why I watch all those Star Zvezda TV channels and other TV channels, to document it, to write about it, because it's interesting to research how it affects people, and it will help us in the future. And of course, you shouldn't fight propaganda with other propaganda, with counter propaganda. It never works. Uh, it's difficult. It's very difficult. Also, propaganda is loud. They yell. If you watch Russian talk shows, they always yell at each other. And if you put two people together, one is yelling, constantly yelling, one is like quiet but very smart and smarter than the first one, who will win on TV? Of course, the one who is yelling, although he's less smart. But we can't go to the same level. We can't start yelling and using hate speech to win this battle. We need to use something else and to wait. And I think time will help us. It says slightly choppy. The sound is good connection. Okay. Honestly, I didn't want to comment just happy birthday, but it's to Putin, but it's all that came to mind when you asked. I can see and hear you well. Of course. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your comments and for your questions. And it's almost an hour, and I actually feel very tired already. As I have already said, I talked a lot today, so I need some rest. Thank you guys again so much, and please like and subscribe. Bye.